Welcome to Domain Academy podcast. With us today is our special guest, Leanne McMahon, founder of Crunch.id and Domain Academy graduate. And she's going to take us on a deep dive into domain valuations. And we also have James Iles. James, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, and then we'll kick it off to Leanne with a couple of questions that we have where we think will really help new investors.
Awesome. Yeah, my name's James Iles. I'm the Domain Investment Community Manager for GoDaddy, and I'm really excited to have Leanne on the show today just to have a deep dive into domain valuations. So let's go for it.
We're lucky. Leanne is definitely an expert in not only domain investing, but specifically in valuation. And her website, Crunch.id, is something that I personally use and find very valuable. So we wanted to get her take on what name makes a domain name valuable. It is one of the things that we cover in depth in Domain Academy, because finding out what value to put on a name is really at the core of either buying to be able to make money or when you get an offer to sell. So with that, Leanne, I've got some questions for you.
Hit me.
All right. We'd like to know, what are the fundamentals that you look at when you try and value a domain name?
The key points for me valuing a domain name, when you start out, names jump out at you and you like them, and then you kind of talk yourself into why it's a good name. So you say, oh, maybe that could be a fitness club. Maybe someone would start a fitness club on that name, or maybe it could be this product. So I think initially you just want to get yourself out of this could be, this may be, and actually look into what it is and the points behind that where it could sell. So you'll want to check how many companies use those words. Mm-hmm. If it's one word, two word, how many of those are being used? If it's, Pacific Solutions, there's going to be quite a few companies using those. And if the .com comes up, that's going to hold some value because there'll be people on the .org and the .net. So it's just kind of seeing what value it has in terms of companies already using it and domain names already registered. Looking at that as a general overview, and then when you feel confident enough, going on a bit of a deeper dive in researching these points.
I really like how you brought that up, where you find a name and you think this is a great name, right? Because I think that's one thing that I definitely struggle with when I first started as an investor, and I see over and over for newer investors that you go, wow, this is such a great name. I can't believe it's available. Let me buy it right now. And they buy a bunch, and then they realize that it's hard to sell, right? Because it doesn't have the end user adoption where people will use it for business. So I like how you brought that up.
You are just waiting, hoping that one day someone starts a business and wants to call it that, which, those names sell from time to time, but I wouldn't want a portfolio made of them because they're certainly not hitting the 1% sell-through rate, 2% sell-through rate. They're quite rare sales. So I've been guilty of this. And I mean, I probably still am. I'll sometimes just grab a name because I just think, oh, I like it. And it's, it's only $8, $9, $10. But it shouldn't be the basis of a portfolio by any means.
Yeah, these are more lottery tickets, aren't they? These are just those lottery tickets that you're hoping are going to convert into a big win. But like you say, the foundations of a good portfolio, I think, are built on domain valuation. So how did data help you in the early days?
I think in the early days, I was just, there was an element of just liking names and not doing too much research. But then when I was checking data points, it was, how many SLDs is it taken in? I'd look at search volume as well, which isn't something I pay too much attention to now, but I would look at that. I would look at the cost per click to see how much advertisers were paying to advertise on that. And these are points that I'll look at a glance today, but they were the ones I sort of focused on then. And my success has increased since I didn't focus on those quite so much and focused more on use, companies using those exact terms.
But things like SLD usage are very good indicators of the potential value, right? So that's a good one to start with.
It is a good one to start with, and not just for the exact term. So if you use .db, you can put the term in, and it will also give you, so that the example I gave earlier, so Pacific Solutions. I should have chosen one that wasn't so much of a tongue twister. Oh, yeah, I'm regretting that decision now. But you might see that come up as a .com, and then you'll go on .db and say it's registered in 12 extensions. But then you'll also see that there's companies with pacificsolutionsgroup.com. So the two word will be an upgrade for them. Or, variations, they've got a hyphen, they're Pacific Solutions, but they've got a hyphen. So looking at those points as well, and then you can see that your name could be valuable to these companies. If you see the .net and someone's operating on the .com, they're not going to buy the .net from you. They've already got the best name they can have. So you want to look for ones where the name is longer and this is a shorter, or they couldn't get that one at the time, so they added group on the end, or they added another prefix, suffix. So using the SLD, the other words either side, you can also grab some gems.
So just real quick, an SLD is what's to the left of the dot on the name. So in Pacific Solutions, it would be the SLD, and .com is what we call the TLD.
Exactly.
I really like your point of, how many potential opportunities for an upgrade would there be for these other customers, potential customers of yours to buy this name. I think that's something that's a key data point to look at. So that's good that you brought that up for new investors.
It's good because then also you can buy it for your portfolio, and chances are at some point over the next few years they're going to come and find you. But then if cash flow is low, it's also a name that you already know you can outbound because you've seen these inferior domains and you can reach out to them. So it kind of gives you both options of being able to just keep it as a core portfolio name, or to go out there and outbound it, which you probably wouldn't get the same asking price. But again, if you needed the cash flow, you could just start reaching out to all these people. You've already done the research and your portfolio is hopefully full of these kind of names.
And on similar domains, how many domains have to be taken in order for you to think that that's a valuable domain?
It's not just about taken for me, it's about built out as well.
Yeah.
Because you'll see a lot of ones that appear taken, but they don't resolve, or they're for sale from another domain investor. So I would want to see minimum 5-10 built out so that I know that if I need to, I can outbound that. And chances are they're going to come to you anyway within the next few years. But yeah, I would want to see 5 or 10 that are built out, maybe some that are for sale more expensive than you plan to price it. And I would want to see that the name I'm buying hasn't been for sale for 10 years for $100, because then I know that actually no one did want to upgrade to that in the first place.
And there's so many of those gems out there that having that as a metric should be good enough to help you on your way to understanding what a good value domain is and hopefully picking some up. So in terms of the tools for that, you mentioned .db. Domain Academy has something similar where you can look up the specifics of a domain and see which ones are taken.
Crunchbase is good for looking up this as well, but Crunchbase limits you to seeing the first 5 results. But on the Domain Academy tool, actually, it's funny you mentioned that, is you can put it in and there's a startups tab, and that gives you all the Crunchbase companies. I don't know if it gives you every single one, but it's comprehensive in the last few times that I've used it. And you can go there and you can see what domain they're using, and if it's inferior, you can see how much funding they've had recently. So if they're operating on a 3-word .net and you've got the 2-word .com and they just got 5 million in funding, then you know that they're going to be a good candidate for this name, and it's not going to be a usual, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 name. You could price more for that.
You're rubbing your hands on that one.
Yeah, exactly.
Crossing your fingers.
Yeah, all of it.
Yeah, I think the tools we have are really helpful for people. And one of the other things that you brought up that is outside of our Domain Academy tool set is archive.org, where you can go and look at what used to be on the domain or the website that was up. And that's really helpful because, as you said, you want to look at if there's a lot of TLDs that are taken, but you want to make sure that they were either in use somehow, not just for sale forever, for a low price, or that they weren't just the same person. So sometimes somebody comes up with an idea. I want to buy, supersneakers.com, and I buy all the other TLDs to go with it because I want to make sure I'm protected. And then it never comes to anything and I drop them all. So it looks like there's 20 taken, but it was always me, right? So it's just one end user demand rather than a bunch of people. So
yeah, you see that a lot as well. If you shortlist 10 names and go and research them, 8 of them are going to be the exact situation you described. So yeah, that's a really important point.
So I'd like to know if you had a few things to consider, like if you could just look at a couple data points that were important for someone who's new. This might be a lot for them to take in. What would be a couple that you could, pick out as I would always look at these 2 or 3?
Okay. The SLD that we've discussed, I would definitely look at that. That's quite easy to take a deep dive, even when you're a new investor. quite easy to do that research. It does take time, but it takes time for everybody. So I would say definitely do that. I would check on name bio if it's sold before, because if you're picking it up and it's already sold for $2,000, then you know there was interest in that name. There could have been other companies that wanted it, didn't get the chance because it sold. Now it's back on the market. You can probably price it higher. So I think that's an important thing to check. I think it's also important to check if the other TLDs are on sale, maybe for a lower price than you were planning on selling it on. If you're finding a .com, but the .net's available for $1,000, the .com's available for $1,500, you know, maybe the one word in .io is available, then there's just really not a lot of interest around that name. So that's something that I would check. And like we said, the history of, has it been for sale itself for years and no one's bothered? The opposite point of that is it might have been for sale, but it's been priced at 50 grand and it's just a complete moonshoot of a name. And you know that if you bring that down to $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, that has a much better chance of selling because it's a much more realistic point. So they're the initial things that I would sort of cover when I'm getting into valuing names at, you know, early on.
One of the things that I think people often overlook is that alternative, you know, so if I have those supersneakers.net, right, and I price it for $50,000 and, you know, there's a lot of TLDs taken for it, but somebody's got the com priced for $3,000, then who wouldn't buy the com for $3,000, right? So that makes, you know, it really unlikely that I'm going to sell mine. So looking at those alternatives, or, you know, trying to see if the person could use, you know, 2 words instead of 1 right now. Do they really need to upgrade to that 1? Does it make it a stronger brand, or are they just a local plumber that really wants to have ArizonaPlumbing.com because they're not going to, you know, operate on plumbing.com worldwide? You know, so trying to think about what type of alternatives in that case, you know, for a plumber in Arizona or that city, that might be the best name for them to go to. So just trying to think about what alternatives are out there. And we're seeing that a lot now with AI being popular. You know, companies want to get a .ai so that they can show that they have AI, you know, component to them. It might even be like a banking company .ai, so that you don't think of them traditionally as using AI, but saying, hey, look, we use AI. They can't really go on a .io or a .net and have that same impact. So their alternatives are very low. They could have banking company AI.com, or they could have, you know, banking.ai. And that's really, you know, limits their alternatives. So that does definitely impact the desirability and pricing of a name. And so people overlook a lot. So speaking of pricing of a name, your website is extremely helpful on Crunch.id because you see what sales are actually happening, and you can see trends, and you can see when keywords start to change. So the main word in the name going up or down in value, or you know, different things that come up. And that happens all the time. Like I just mentioned, AI is hot right now, so the prices have been going up, but those trends change. And so how do you use data to evaluate your portfolio and keep your prices up over time to either raise or lower them? What data points do you use to try and determine like how you should price, and how often would you look at those data points and names to decide if you need to reprice your name? You know, is it every month, every year?
Yeah, it's a good question. Not something that I really do often enough. But so Crunch.id's data comes from name bio. So I keep a close eye there. They also have, I only use data above $500. They also have all the data below that. And they have another section for names just below $100. So you see a lot of wholesale movement there. So it is just a case of reading those kind of things all the time, subscribing to tech newsletters, venture capital newsletters, and just seeing what trends are going on in all industries, really, so that you can keep an eye on it. And then whenever you have the time, whether it's every quarter or every 6 months, of just scanning your portfolio. As it gets bigger, this kind of thing gets a bit harder, but just sort of scanning through. So maybe 2 years ago, you had a couple of .ais that you had priced at 2,000 and they were 1 words. And, you know, scanning through every few months, you'll say, oh, I'm hearing a lot of chatter about AI, I'm going to put those prices up. So it's just keeping in your conscious what's happening in the world, what's happening, especially in tech industries and venture capital, and then applying that to your portfolio and seeing if anything stands out to you as you go through and bumping up the price. And the same if you've registered maybe some GPT names, which are falling out of fashion now. If you've still got those priced at 10K, you know, you need to drop those down and just make some cash while you can on on the way down on that trend.
Yeah, I think I'm guilty of that. So I need to go look at my portfolio because I don't price that as much.
I'm thinking, yeah, I haven't done that for a while.
So I'd like to know too if, there's a lot of talk about automated appraisals, right? And we haven't brought those up, and that's an easy way because it's built into, a lot of marketplaces that you go to. It automatically will show you next to your name what they think it's worth. GoDaddy has GoValue, the brandable marketplaces have their own next to it. And so there's a lot of data out there. Estabot.com is a, automated one that many people use. What role do you think that they have when you're looking at trying to put a price on a name?
For me, they more have value in showing outliers from a list. So you maybe put 10 in and they'll all kind of show the same figure. But then as soon as one shows a little spike, maybe it's valued at, all the names are valued around 1,500, and then you see one at a spike of 3,000. Then you can take a deeper dive with the data points we've talked about to see, why is that showing me that valuation? Why is that different? And then from that, you'll usually find, well, it's sold before, or you'll find that those keywords have been strong and have sold before. So I think they're good for that. I don't tend to use them too much to price exactly. I know GoDaddy also has the Go Value tool, which is a bit more based on the market and how other investors are pricing their inventory. So I find that quite useful. But in terms of just automated evaluations, it's more about picking out gems than using them to price my portfolio.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I mean, I don't think people should rely on any of the automated appraisal systems out there to determine a final price, right? But it is a useful data point among all the ones we mentioned, just to say, oh, maybe I should pay more attention to this, or why are they saying that?
Yeah, exactly.
It can help you get through. Go to auctions. There's tens of thousands of expired names at a time, so it can help you to get through those, quickly or
yeah, perfect for that kind of situation.
Let's say I were to get an inquiry, right? So I'm a new investor and I get an inquiry on a name and they want me to, give them a price back. So say, we want to buy your name. What's it for sale for? How would you put a price on that? What would you advise me to do as a newer investor when I get an inbound query?
I would say try and find out who the inbound inquiry is from. Sometimes you don't have that information, but sometimes you do. Sometimes you'll have a country and even initials. From that, you can see if this is going to be an upgrade for an existing company. And again, using tools like Crunchbase, you can see if they've just got some funding or just how well they're doing in general. So we'll try and find out who's making the inquiry, not just to, hike the price because for the sake of it, but it's just a really interesting point. And then hopefully you've done enough research beforehand in buying the name that you know that it is an upgrade for a lot of companies, that it is valuable, that it's built out in all these other TLDs. So I'll just say have a bucket price in mind. So you'll say, this would be a £3,000 name, that would be a £5,000 name, that would be a £10,000 name. And then when the inquiry comes in, you can dive a little bit deeper into who's making the inquiry to see if you've priced it correctly and whether it should be higher or lower than that. But I think names under 10K probably should be priced anyway, just to allow people to have the impulse and just go ahead and buy it. But if it is a make an offer situation, that's what I would do. But I would have the confidence in my initial research to have it anchored at a certain point and then work from there.
And how much, obviously not giving away too many secrets, and hopefully no buyers are listening to this, but how much do you vary? So if you've got a buy now price and an offer comes in, what kind of variations do you have? Because obviously you've got a very strong idea based on your research and your valuation points. How much of a difference will you make, say, or a deduction would you make off your buy now price?
Yeah, so all my names are buy it now. So if an offer does come in, it's usually about talking the price down rather than getting an offer in and then me trying to talk them up from wherever their anchor point is. So when they come to me, they know that I've got a buy it now of 3K. For me, it kind of depends what kind of month I'm having, how big my renewal bill is that month, or all these sort of things. So sometimes someone will make an offer of 1,500. I'll just take it if I need to. Sometimes I'm having a good month and I'm feeling, like I can negotiate a bit more. But yeah, those kind of names, I'd probably always take about £2,000 for them because they're usually, the pools I move in are the hand reg and the no contest auctions and the closeouts. So my inventory is quite easy to replace. I think as long as you're into the 4 figures and then just depending how the month is going, just take it and just reinvest.
Because something that we didn't touch on earlier, but I think is important, is that he made the transition to being a full-time domain investor. So obviously that has some influence on some of the decisions that they're making in terms of creating cash flow. So that might help some people starting out to understand how much of a variation you might have. So from your initial buy now valuation point, you may want to reduce that asking price at certain points to create that cash flow.
Absolutely, yeah. So the first 2 years of my domain investing career, I was part-time, I had a job. And then the last 2, I've been full-time. So yeah, the first 2, you can hold quite firm on prices. You don't need the cash flow. But then when you're full-time, some months you do, some months you don't. So it really varies as to what strategy you go for. But if you have another income stream, that frees you up to be more strict with how much you take. But I think even then, if you are just using, if it is just hand reg and closeouts, just take it anyway and roll it up. It's 1,500, just reinvest that. Your portfolio is going to grow really quickly. I would say do that anyway, but everyone would have their own strategy. But I think that's the way to go.
Obviously, as long as you're reinvesting it using those valuation points that we talked about earlier.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, not just because you like it.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So before we wrap this up, I'd just like to know if you have any advice on anything that we didn't even cover that might help out a new investor.
I think my best advice for new investors, and this was something I heard Jason Shepherd say on a podcast a few years ago, was before you start, don't spend any money, just go on expireddomains.com, look at the drop lists and favorite names that you like and do some research on them. And then the next day, see which ones got taken and see where they got priced. And just do that for a few weeks so that you're getting a feel for the drop lists. And if your watch list, the names are never taken, then you know that you need to retrain your eye. And then once you get to the point where every name you're watching is being taken and being sold, being listed by another investor, then you can maybe start investing yourself. But don't go for the obvious ones like, oh, here's, I don't know.
Yeah, like a one-word
.com. Like, oh, wow, that got taken. I'm really good at this. Just, look for the slightly more obscure ones and just try and train your eye with that. Play around with valuations. Just before you even spend any money, you can do all the research that we've talked about here before you even own a name. And, you don't have to have any intention of buying it. You can just do it for fun and just to train your eye for it. Yeah, I would say thanks to Jason for that, because I know that helped me and I think it would help everybody.
Walking before you can run, for sure.
Walking before you can. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's amazing advice. It definitely would be helpful for new investors. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you get to train without spending any money and, no renewal bills or anything like that. So yeah, I think great way to start. Take some work, but you have to learn that work ethic and that routine to be able to enter the industry anyway, I think. So I think it's good trading all around.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely a way to start. And like you said, it does take work. It's not, we say in Domain Academy, it's not like a get rich quick. It's work like anything else. So
it is.
But thank you so much for joining us. I feel honored that you're sharing your knowledge with us, and we really appreciate your time. So thanks for helping everyone out. And
thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me. I feel honored to have been invited.
Thanks, Leanne.
Yes.